everybody, Brittany here with a fun sewing project for you. Today we are going to be working on this embellished children's dress. I am in the process of making 3 of these for my nieces for an upcoming beach trip that we are taking, and I'm very excited. So the dress itself, I used pattern number 8102 from Simplicity and whipped this up in about an hour, so it's a very easy dress to make. And we're mainly going to be focusing on how I did the embellishments with this. I used 2 different sizes of rickrack trim, some pink pom-pom trim, and then this ruffle which I made from some extra material from the dress that I'm actually wearing. Ruffles are very easy to make and they're extremely versatile. You can use them in not only apparel but also in home decor sewing, and it's a great way again to use up some excess material. So with all that being said, let's get started. Okay, so step 1 with making our ruffle is we need to get a measurement of the area where we plan to attach the ruffle. So in this case, measurement along the bottom of the dress, which is about 36 inches. I'm doing the 1.5 rule, but you can do the 2 rule if you want to. So what that means is I'm taking that 36 inches times 1.5 and I've cut out a strip that is 54 inches in length. I don't want this to be too full just because I don't want to create too much weight at the bottom. And then the width is up to your own discretion depending on the project that you're working on. Now what I'm going to do for the bottom part of the ruffle is I'm going to use my serger to create a nice smooth edge. If you don't have a serger, just do a normal hem, but the serger is a nice thing to invest in because it really does cut down on time and definitely creates a nice smooth edge. So we're going to start with that, and then I will show you how we gather the fabric to create the ruffle effect. So let's go get started on that. Okay, so you're going to see how quickly a serger creates a nice, beautiful finished edge. Again, just create a traditional hem if you don't have a serger, but this is definitely a big time saver and worth the investment if you do a lot of sewing. Alright, so you can see that the serger has created a nice smooth edge here, and this is just really a huge time saver again, and also this is cutting off any uneven little frays that we may have on the side, and it's just absolutely wonderful. So again, sergers are awesome, so I would highly recommend getting one of these if you plan on doing a lot of sewing. Alright, so we have our last little bit here. You can see how quickly that goes through and just how nice and even that is. It's just absolutely wonderful. So now we're going to move over to the sewing machine. I'm going to show you how we gather the fabric to create the ruffle effect. Okay, so now we are over at the sewing machine and we're going to put in our stitch for creating our ruffle effect. And I'm about 3/8 of an inch in here with my needle, and then I'm going to make sure that I also have a pretty good size stitch length. If you do a tight stitch length for this, it's going to be really difficult to do this ruffle effect. So you want a nice longer stitch length, and make sure you also have a good tail of strings here at the end. So now we're just going to create a nice little base stitch here at the top. Alright, so you can see this is not a super tight, hopefully you guys can see that. This is not a super tight stitch length. We want something that has a little bit of movement to it that we can easily pull these strings. So now we will just add our basting stitch to our ruffles. Okay, so now that I have both strips of fabric basted and ready to create the ruffle effect, what I'm going to do is find my end here. Here we go, and I'm going to choose the bottom thread, which is the bobbin thread, and I'm going to separate these out. Let's see if I can grab that bobbin thread here. There we go, got the bobbin thread. So you're going to hang on to the bobbin thread and hold that tight to kind of wrap it around my finger like I'm doing floss, and you're just going to gently pull it. Don't pull too hard because you will break the thread. And then you're just going to move your fabric along that bobbin thread, and what you're doing is you're creating a ruffle effect. So the goal here with this 54-inch strip is to get it down to 36 inches or around there to cover the front of our dress. So that's why we allow that extra bit, is so we can create our ruffle. So now I'm going to do this for both strips, and then I'll show you how I'm going to attach it to the dress. Okay, so we are gathered and we have a beautiful ruffle, and what I've done is after I finished up gathering, I did attach the two ruffles together and I serged that off so you have a nice clean edge there. So now I'm going to attach this to my dress, and then I will show you what I'm doing. Since I left this raw here at the top, I'm covering it up with the pom-pom fringe. Ordinarily I wouldn't do this and I would have a nice clean edge, but there is no sense in serging this off just because it's going to be covered up by the trim that we're using for this project. So let's go get started on that. Alright, so now that my two strips of ruffle are attached together, I'm going to pin them to the bottom of the dress, and I just have the bottom of the ruffle lined up with the bottom of the dress here. And so roughly kind of the center back of the dress is where I'm going to have this one end. And make sure that you leave your strings, don't clip those off, because you may have to kind of work your ruffle a little bit to make sure that you do cover the entire length of your garment. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this in place. And don't pull too hard because you definitely don't want to undo your ruffle. Okay, so we're coming up on our last little bit that we need to pin down, and what I'm going to do for the end here where the ends are coming together, I'm just going to fold this over like this. And it's in the back, so no one's really going to see that these aren't attached to each other. But and then since we have a ruffle, it's not really going to show. I just want to make sure that it's folded over and just kind of meets over and crosses over just a little bit. So now we're going to head over to the sewing machine and attach the ruffle to the dress. Okay, so we're back over at the sewing machine, and we're going to use the stitch that we created, the basting stitch, to actually make the ruffle. We're going to use that as our guide and try to run as closely across that as possible, and make sure that you're going slowly and separating your ruffle out like this and laying it flat. We want this to be as smooth as possible because we will be attaching other trim on top of this. So go slowly. It is not a sprint, it is a marathon, so take your time with this process. Okay, so we have successfully attached our entire ruffle to the bottom of our dress, and it looks fantastic. And like I said, we do have a raw edge here, but not to worry about that because we're going to use our pom-pom trim and cover that up. So I'll just pin that down and then attach that, and then also while I'm doing this, I'm also going to attach this green rickrack trim. This is by Wrights. I got this at Joann's along with the pom-pom fringe. And so the rickrack trim, what I'm going to do is I will attach that roughly about an inch above the top of the pom-pom trim. So I'm going to run over to the sewing machine and put that together now. Alright, so we're back over at the machine, and we have our pom-pom trim pinned over the raw edge of our ruffle, and we're going to cover that up. And remember to take your time doing this. You want to make sure that your trim is nice and even and runs in a nice straight line. So here we go. Alright, so we're coming up to our final little bit, and what we're going to do at the very, very end of our trim, I've cut it off, and hopefully you can see this. I'm actually going to flip this under so then we don't have a raw edge on the end of our trim, and then I'm going to run the machine back and forth a couple of times just to make sure that that end is nice and smooth and laid down flat. Okay, so we have our green rickrack pinned in place, and what we're going to do is we're just going to do one stitch. We're not going to try to follow the design of the rickrack. We're just going to do a stitch right down the center, and it should catch all of the rickrack. And so again, take your time on this and make sure you have nice even stitches. Okay, and we're coming up to the end of attaching our green rickrack, and similar to the pom-pom fringe, we're going to fold over this end here and make sure that we don't have a raw edge. So I'm just going to run across that real quick. Alrighty. That'll about do that. And last, we are going to attach the blue rickrack across the neckline, and then we will be finished with our adorable children's dress. Okay, so we are getting ready to attach the last bit of trim, the blue rickrack, and what I'm doing is I'm pinning it down about a 1/2 inch below the edge here of the dress neckline. And I'm starting in the center back and then I'm running up the strap, but I'm not going up all the way. I'm only going partially up with my rickrack. And the reason for that is with these little tie straps, I just think it would be a little bit of a challenge to have that extra bulkiness and try to tie these. So we're not going to do that. And I'm just going to pin this down, and then it's going to be one continuous piece going all the way around. And the great thing about rickrack is that it's absolutely fantastic around curves. So it's really easy to use as a trim. And as soon as I get this pinned down, we will take it over to the sewing machine. All right, we're going to attach this rickrack now. And again, remember to take your time. We want nice, even stitches. All right, so you can see I'm kind of slowing down a little bit as I'm getting up to this fold over where the strap is. And what I'm going to do is very, very carefully, I'm going to use my wheel here and do this by hand to attach this just so it doesn't come out of place. And then I'm going to lift my presser foot, spin this around, and continue going down the other direction. Okay, so final stitches here. Perfect. All right, so we have successfully attached all of our trim. I'm going to give this a good pressing, and then we have completed this project. All right, the final trim is on, and we have a beautifully embellished children's dress. I hope you are inspired by this project and recreate this on your own. If you have any questions, certainly add them to the comment section below, and also hit that subscribe button.